We're here today to welcome Susan Crawford, Judge Susan Crawford. She's running for Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, and honest to goodness, we need her on the Supreme Court desperately. So I encourage you to vote April 1st for Judge Crawford. With that in mind, I'll have her speak for you. I'm sorry, I'm not much of a speaker, but thank you for coming, everybody. My goodness, it's a wonderful turnout.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Nice to be here, everybody. We can clap. I can warm you all up. All right. I want to first thank you all for being here on a snowy Saturday afternoon. It is a real pleasure, and I'm glad to have a nice full room of folks to talk to you about this very important upcoming election. So yes, it is April 1st, and the stakes are very high. This election is certainly going to have a big impact on our state and what kind of state we have for our kids in Wisconsin, and is going to affect all of the personal rights and freedoms that we enjoy under our laws and under our state constitution. So the question that voters are going to have to decide come April 1st, or you can also vote early, don't forget about that, is what kind of justice do you want on the Wisconsin Supreme Court? Do you want to have a justice who is going to be fair and impartial, somebody who applies common sense and knows right from wrong, and somebody who puts the safety of our communities first and the fundamental rights and freedoms of all Wisconsinites? Or do you want to have a justice on the Supreme Court who is an extreme partisan politician? Somebody who is running to try to push a partisan agenda on Wisconsin, and somebody who has failed to prioritize public safety, most notably as Attorney General, by failing to get a huge backlog of sexual assault kits tested in Wisconsin. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I've spent the last 6-7 months or so traveling all around the state of Wisconsin. I've been here, I'm back again, but all around the state of Wisconsin, and I believe that after talking to hundreds at least of voters, if not thousands, that people want common sense justice on our Supreme Court. They want justices who are looking to use our laws and our Constitution to protect people, to protect our rights, and to protect our communities. People don't want a politicized Supreme Court, and they don't want a justice who's trying to get on the Supreme Court to drive a political agenda. So looking out for protecting people's rights and working to keep our community safe is something I have done for my whole career, and that's because of the values I learned growing up in Wisconsin. So I grew up in Chippewa Falls, a little ways up the road, and I was one of 4 kids, and I had a great childhood there. On a day like this when I was a kid, my dad would try to round us up to take us out ice fishing on one of the Chippewa County lakes, which, I did once in a while. Always fun when the fish were biting, less fun when it was just darn cold out there. But that's the kind of childhood I had. Spent a lot of time outside, riding my bike around town, and the kind of community where people know each other and watch out for each other. I think a lot like this one. But my dad was an engineer. He got his degree from UW-Madison on the GI Bill after he served in Korea. My mom is a third-generation Wisconsinite. She grew up in Greene County. My great-grandpa started our family history there when he opened a barber shop on the square in Monroe, Wisconsin, back in the 1860s. So we have some deep roots in Wisconsin. And my mom and dad live in Greene County today. They retired back to my mom's hometown about 25 years ago. And my mom gets out and does a little campaigning for me when she can. She takes my flyers over to the neighbors and says, you should vote for her. She's my daughter. And good enough reason for her. But if my mom can do it, all you can too, because she's going to turn 90 this year. And her birthday's on April 1st, folks.
Wow.
Oh.
So we got to give Mom a good birthday present this year. But growing up in Chippewa Falls, life wasn't always easy for my family. I'm sure many of you could say the same things. We had our challenges. My little sister was born with a medical condition and had a lot of special needs and needed a lot of extra care and watching out for. I, as her big sister, was often the one who had that responsibility, making sure that she got to school and home again, holding her hand, walking her past the snow drifts up to here in the middle of the winter time. That's how I grew up, is watching out for my little sister, and protecting people is something I started with really early in my life. Later on, when I was in high school, my dad was laid off from his job, and that caused my family to really have to pull together to get through some tough times financially. And as a result, I financed my own college education. So I know the value of hard work. I was a hard-working kid, the kind of kid that always had a couple of different jobs going. And I learned right from wrong. I learned the value of common sense, and I learned that people have to stick together and back each other up. And I bet that a lot of you have similar stories about your own families and watching out for your own people. Now I'm a mom. I'm a proud mom of two. My son and daughter are grown up now, young people starting out their lives, and I'm really proud of them because they want to give something back. They want to contribute something to their communities and help people. And I know what it's like to worry about your kids, to worry about their futures, and to want to keep them safe. And that is something, too, that it's been kind of a guiding light for me in my career. I want every Wisconsin kid to grow up in a safe community. So all of those are the kind of values I bring to the race, wanting to do what's right and protect families and protect our fundamental rights. Protect Wisconsinites, and that's what I've always done throughout my legal career. So I went to law school to begin with, really. But I started my career as a prosecutor at the Wisconsin Department of Justice. That was back in the 90s, 1997. I joined the Wisconsin Department of Justice, and I was a prosecutor, prosecuting the toughest felony cases all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I always worked hard to make sure that I was doing justice. Enforcing our laws, making sure that people who committed violent crimes and hurt others, hurt our communities, were held accountable and taken out of our communities so they couldn't hurt anybody else. I also believe and worked at that time as a healthcare fraud prosecutor and sometimes prosecuting corporations, because I believe that corporations that harm our communities and violate our laws also should be held accountable. And I also think that if you're the victim of a crime, your rights deserve to be protected, and you deserve to have justice, timely justice. So those are all the common sense values that I brought to my job as a prosecutor. Later on in my career, I worked as a lawyer representing people just like all of you, ordinary Wisconsinites, in our courts, fighting for people often when their rights had been taken away by the government. So I represented public school teachers when the government took away their rights in the workplace. I represented voters, some of our most vulnerable voters who were registered and eligible to vote but were unable to vote after Wisconsin passed a really strict voter ID law. And the state government at that time wasn't prepared. It just wasn't ready to make sure that all eligible Wisconsinites could get the ID they needed to vote without having to pay anything. So that was really important work I did to make sure every eligible Wisconsin voter can exercise their right to vote. I also represented Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin and its doctors when the government tried to restrict women's access to the reproductive health care services that they needed. And we were successful in those cases. We made sure that those laws were struck down so that doctors could continue to provide services to women in Wisconsin. One of those cases was called Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin versus Brad Schimmel. We won that one, I'm happy to say. So, fighting for our fundamental rights and standing with people who have had them taken away, that's part of my life experience and part of what I'm bringing to this race as a common sense candidate for justice. And now I'm a judge. I've been a judge in the circuit court in Dane County since 2018, and I work hard every day to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake in my courtroom. I want everybody who sits down in front of me in court to leave my courtroom, whether they won or lost that day, to feel like they got their day in court and the judge treated them with respect. I think Wisconsinites expect that from their judges. And again, that's the kind of justice I'm going to be on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. When I'm sitting down behind the bench, I'm always standing up for Wisconsin values and Wisconsin families. But here's what we're up against. We got to talk about the other guy a little bit. Brad Schimmel. He is the most extreme candidate to ever run for the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He is somebody who has spent his career focused on partisanship, politics, and self-promotion. We don't need any of that on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. But if you look at what he's done and what he says he'll do, you get a pretty good idea of what kind of justice he'd be. As a partisan politician, he was the guy who, as Attorney General, let thousands of sexual assault kits go untested for years. There was a big backlog of over 6,000 of those kits that had not been tested. And these are the kits that contain the DNA, right, that help us know who perpetrated those crimes. In 2 years, he managed to get 9 of them tested out of that backlog of over 6,000. And there's a phrase in the criminal justice system, justice delayed is justice denied. So for the children and women, primarily, who were the victims of those crimes, that's justice denied. That was because Brad Schimmel had other priorities as Attorney General. He wouldn't go to the legislature to ask for additional funding to speed up that testing of those rape kits. He did go to the legislature to ask for more lawyers to pursue a right-wing legal agenda. He filed a lawsuit. He was one of the lead attorneys general in the country to file a lawsuit to try to overturn the Affordable Care Act. That would have resulted in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites losing access to their health insurance coverage for things like pre-existing conditions, right? So not somebody who has the best interests of Wisconsinites in mind. He also failed women by trying to restrict and limit access to reproductive health care for women. He has been a longtime opponent to reproductive health care rights for women. With that Affordable Care Act legal challenge, one of the things that that act did was ensure that women can obtain coverage for contraception. That would have gone out the window too. Even as a candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, he has said he believes an 1849 law in Wisconsin should be enforced as a criminal ban on all abortions unless it's necessary for the life of the mother. So that means no exceptions for things like sexual assault, for the health of the mother, or even for children who have been abused. So he's an extremist on that issue, and he, if he gets on the Supreme Court, is not going to protect women. He's not going to protect families, and he's not going to prioritize the safety of our communities. He was also one of the only attorneys general in the country who refused to get our state signed on to a national lawsuit to hold the opioid companies accountable for flooding our communities with addictive drugs. Those drugs have destroyed a lot of people and a lot of families in Wisconsin. Brad Schimmel decided not to prioritize that. At the same time, he was taking more campaign contributions from pharmaceutical companies than just about any other candidate in Wisconsin has. So Brad Schimmel is somebody who's always going to put his extreme politics ahead of the health and safety of Wisconsinites. He's going to put his politics ahead of being a fair and impartial justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And he wants this seat because he wants to force that extreme agenda on all of us. So that's why we have to win this election and make sure that our Supreme Court is not politicized, that we have justices who are being fair, deciding cases based on the facts and based on the law and based on using the law to protect the rights of Wisconsinites. So we've got about 6 weeks and 3 days to go, and that time is going to go by fast. So I'm looking at all of you and counting on all of you to help me. We need to have you all talk to your family and your friends and your neighbors and get them to understand what their choice is in this race. And tell them that you're choosing common sense over extremism. You're choosing somebody who puts community safety first over somebody who has dropped the ball and failed on community safety. And that you want a future where all of our fundamental rights are going to be protected. So are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. If you guys help me, you get out the vote on April 1st, I know we're going to declare a victory. We can do this, you know? So let's get out there and win this election on Wisconsin. And we got a question already.
I have actually 3 questions.
All right,
The
shoot.
first one is, are you gonna debate Schimmel?
We have a debate scheduled, yes. It is March 12th, I think, March 12th. It'll be televised.
Public radio then, or?
I think it'll be on,
With WISN 12 out of Milwaukee.
and I'm sure that'll be broadcast statewide. Do you know what network that is by any chance? ABC? ABC.
Okay,
Yes.
the second question is, of course, they've got a real nasty commercial against you.
Yes.
You need to address that,
Yeah.
you know, because I've seen that, this is their playbook.
Yep.
Time after time after time.
Right.
And I've seen where a campaign doesn't address that.
Yeah.
You know, you need to get right in front of the camera and address that,
Yeah.
because I have to believe they're lying
They are. Yeah.
completely.
That's because they are.
That's because they are. That's right.
It's beyond belief.
They always lie,
It's,
of
it's a
course.
lie.
Okay, the third question.
Yeah.
In one of Schimmel's commercials, he was claiming that he took care of all kinds of these rape kits.
Right.
And you're
Yeah.
saying he took 9?
9. Right.
Out
That's
of what?
you know, that is
4
a
years?
well documented fact. 9 in 2 years.
In 2
9
years.
in 2 years. And then, you know, he was up for re-election in November of 2018. What happened? He hit the gas. He hit the gas. And sometime in 2017, it was increasingly obvious that it was going to be an issue in his re-election campaign. So then he's like, well, folks, hurry up. Let's get some of those kits tested. It was too little too late, though. So, yes.
Fortunately.
Yes, you know, the voters sent him home in 2018.
absolutely.
Largely over that issue, because he let 2 years go by doing nothing. And then it's all of a sudden, let's hurry things up, because it's my political future that's at stake, right?
And now we have a good attorney general.
Now we do, yep, and, you know, there have been cases prosecuted out of those kits, out of that backlog. You know, predators who were out there on our streets who have been
Yeah.
brought to justice now. But, you know, after a delay, and, you know, were there new victims in that meantime? That's what we don't know. Yeah, good questions, thank you.
That despicable ad that Steve referred to
Yeah,
that suggests that you have anything to do with releasing
Rape.
inmates,
yeah,
or that you have anything to do with where they are housed once
Right.
they are released.
Right.
That's not your preview. You
Obviously,
don't have any
right.
control over that at
No.
all.
no, nope, that is the Department of Corrections' job
Department
to
of
figure out
Corrections.
where people live. And, you know, it's just kind of ironic because Brad Schimmel is attacking me for cases in which I gave people several years of prison time, you know, followed by several more years of strict supervision by the Department of Correction, and ordered people to be lifetime registrants on the sex offender registry, so they will always be tracked. And meanwhile, he's out there giving light sentences, jail time or no time, to people that have committed acts of domestic violence, and, you know, and sexual violence as well. So it is him trying to hide the ball and pretend that his record is something other than what it is, and that my record is something other than what it is.
Just so you know, I work for the Department of Corrections, and they do not release a pedophile anywhere near a school. They do not live,
Yeah.
they're not
There are
placed.
limitations.
That's
Yeah.
completely false. Right.
Yeah.
I was curious, like say someone was sentenced by a judge, then they're up for parole. Does that judge or some judge have to sign on the parole?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
so
so-
could they say that you approved it even though the Department of
Right.
No,
Right.
but I'm just saying the Department of Corrections say he's ready for parole. Does a judge get
Judge
involved
does,
at any
the
point?
judge does not, but I will say that under Wisconsin law now, we have old law, and then starting in about 2000, the legislature really overhauled the sentencing law in Wisconsin, and now the person serves however much the judge says at sentencing, exactly that amount. A couple of like minor exceptions where somebody can get early release for completing drug treatment and things like that, but generally, they're gonna serve the amount of time the judge set. Yeah. Old law, there was a parole system, and people would get out after serving like 25% of their time sometimes, but the legislature got rid of that some time ago. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I have two questions.
Okay,
How will you balance being independent judge
yeah.
and elected official?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. Thank you for that. So I am just trying to be really principled as a candidate for this office. It's a nonpartisan race, so I'm not running with a D or an R after my name. And that's one of the reasons that I don't answer questions or tell people, how are you going to decide this case? Or how are you going to decide that case? Because the rules for judges are that we don't do that. We don't announce how we're going to decide cases. And particularly, we don't do it in situations where you read something in the newspaper about a case. Brad Schimmel is the other kind of candidate. You know, he has a long history as a partisan politician, and he is not shy about saying, for example, how he would decide the current legal challenge to part of Act 10 that's moving through the courts. He immediately, after part of it was held unconstitutional by a circuit court judge, his campaign issued a press release saying it was wrong. Based on what? You know, what he read in the newspaper. It wasn't based on the evidence in that case or the lawyer's arguments in that case or really anything. It was just based on a hot take from the newspaper. That's not the kind of judge I am. So I'm running as a judge. I'm not running as a politician. And, you know, I'm not announcing how I would decide cases. I talk about my experience, things I have worked for, because I think it's important for all of you to know kind of what my values are and what my priorities in work has been throughout my career. But, you know, I'm just not going to say how I would decide cases because, number one, I only do that based on the full record and all the facts and the law presented. And number two, I wouldn't do it because it prejudices the parties in those cases. It's showing bias and it's being not impartial if you are doing that. So thank you. Number two. Yes.
Last question, number
Yes.
2. This is a Jackson County
Yeah.
and we have a public school.
Yes.
Public means government school
Yes.
and they are the largest employers of a Jackson County. And 99% all are white teachers, white staff, one colored guy, one person of a minority.
Yeah.
Do you support supremacy of one race in a government school?
I think you're asking me for a position on a policy question with that. That's the kind of thing I don't wade into. That's a good question for politicians. It's not a question that a judge could answer. I will say in a very broad way that I believe that people have a right not to be discriminated against in employment and in, you know, all other kinds of areas of the law that the law prohibits discrimination. And, you know, if a case involving some kind of discrimination based on race or ethnicity or sex, you know, discrimination against women is also prohibited, you know, I'll protect the rights of people.
Yes.
Oh, no. We can't deal with those issues anymore. Come on.
Well, you know, we still got state laws that protect
Oh,
people,
all
right?
So we little people cannot reach to the judges or judiciary system.
Yeah.
But you are the judge, you know 1964, the rule of law of
Right.
Martin Luther King, 1968,
Yeah,
1971.
Civil Rights Act, yeah.
So many laws you know, and you know how to enforce. Would you like to enforce it?
Well, I enforce all of our laws, absolutely. But, you know, as a judge, I wait for people to bring the case to me. You know, I don't just announce my positions on this law or that law, or this controversy or that controversy. I wait for the case to come to me, and I make a decision after I've heard all the evidence, and I know what the facts are, and I've heard what the lawyers have to say, because usually, you know, they have competing points of view on how the law should be interpreted. And then I make a decision that's based on common sense and, you know, based on what is that law there to protect, and making sure that it is protecting people. Okay? All right. The lady down here.
I just wanted to thank you for doing your duty, your job
Thank you.
so far.
Thank you.
Uh,
I'll keep going.
in upholding our rights.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. That was a lovely comment. Thank you.